What is up? I'm back again, and this is the longer video that I had promised in regards to the whole Meta tech layoffs that's been happening. I'm going to be dissecting the actual Meta layoff, my deep thoughts on the exact thing that happened, where the company actually stands, and what are my thoughts on it for the future. So I'm actually utilizing this article from Wired because it was the closest to all the research I had pieced together in order to find relevant quotes, thoughts on different employees. We already know 11,000 people got laid off, which is 13% of their staff. It was just such a huge number. And to start it off with this article, it brought down, they did better than Twitter in a sense. Twitter actually did 50% of its workforce. It was a lot less people, but the percentage was much higher. When it comes to deciding exactly what happened, it's actually an obsession. Whenever CEOs get into this zone, they have an obsession to create success continuously for investors to satisfy themselves. We already know Zuckerberg, multi-billionaire, he could completely stop doing this tomorrow and he'll be fine. Wipe it all out. Be completely fine at all. And all these investors that originally invested in Meta, they'll be fine too because they bought at Meta when it was probably at like a couple of dollars a share. So they're still killing it. However, he has a passion for it. When you have passion for something, it becomes beyond for money, which I don't blame him. And you're trying to find different ways to resolve for how do you make your company create an impact on the economy continuously? And how do you continue growth? You cannot keep going this trajectory that is going to keep growing like this forever. It has to take some bumps along the way and slow down and ease up with the economy as well. We already know the economy is bad. We are in a recession. If you're in denial about that, I'm just giving you a reality check. We are in a recession. Inflation is high. Housing prices are still high, while the interest rates on obtaining a mortgage has doubled from about less than a year ago, which is insane, massively insane. Groceries are up high. I can't even go to the store and find some organic cantaloupes or honeydew melon, which is very sad because those things I actually like and enjoy eating quite a bit. And I go to Whole Foods and I can't find it. I don't understand that at all whatsoever. So to me, those are all signs that we are in a recession. We're going through some hard economic times. It's not a seasonal thing at all because I found cantaloupes and honeydew melons all year round, strawberries, all these things, but there's a shortage of these things happening and we got to really pay attention to what's happening and what's going on and how to be prepared for it. But back into the whole Meta situation in this article, right? In this right here, today's news isn't only a correction of the pandemic years, says one former Meta employee with knowledge of the company's operation, who left shortly before the layoffs were announced and spoke anonymously because his current employer would not grant him the right to speak on the record to Wired. Most of these tech companies, you do sign that NDA you can't speak about. I was in that situation before where the company gave me equity stake. I couldn't jump to another company that did the same practice that they did for a certain amount of time. And I also couldn't speak to its competitors any way, shape, or form. Pretty much I had to be conscious of what I'm saying, where am I saying it, because if it impacts the company any way, shape, or form, I could be in trouble in terms of losing my equity. But this was a long time ago, and I'm very familiar with how the tech sectors put together its whole package when you actually employed for the company. So I would say it's probably the last 5 to 10 years, originating even before Zuckerberg's metaverse obsession. Some of the losses can be attributed to the sheer range of risky and failed experiments the Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram parent company has conducted over the years. The former employee says, I just can't think in the last 5 years of a successful Meta app or feature that wasn't acquired. The ex-employee says, before suggesting Stories perhaps, which itself was borrowed from Snapchat. All these social media giants, they're all borrowed from each other. We already seen TikTok did a huge trend. They blew out the market with their short videos. We saw YouTube Shorts now adopting it, and they're doing pretty terrific with it as well. And Facebook has done the same thing. They all borrowing ideas from each other. You can call it stealing, whatever, but it's just like with anything. It's like a song having the same chord progression over time. We all steal from each other's songs, chord progressions. Our melodic and emotions vary, and a combination of those things create this unique factor that people are attracted to. And that's what creates these social medias from each other. That's why people jump from one to another. but pretty much a lot of people are on everything quite a bit. Some have stronger preferences, but that's what gives each one of them their voice, is that combination of addiction, that adrenaline, that hook model that they're bringing you in. I know about this because I'm into UX design. This is part of how we get people obsessed with the apps. It's the same way these CEOs are thinking about it. How can they make this more explosive, just like they did on day one, when they initially launched the company and got the startup going. I think that's what Zuckerberg kind of has been trying to do, and that's why he's experimenting. And what he has done, and I'm going to scroll way past this in terms of some statistics, right? In 2017, Meta employed 25,000 staff, and before it sliced 11,000 from its payroll, it had 87,000 employees. The company has grown headcount by an average of 20% in each of the last 5 years. Even after these latest cuts, the newly slimmed down Meta is still 3 times as large as it was in 2017. I spoke to these companies. I can tell you that Google, Facebook, I spoke to this company, not Twitter, but they have a nice budget for experimental because they always want to stay ahead of the curves. They do spend quite a bit of experimenting. Someone at Google I actually spoke to, he spent 5 years working on experimental applications, and I don't think not one of them released, which is kind of scary. Like, I want to see my actual products come out. So after I spoke with him, it didn't go nowhere because as God protected me from being someplace I have no business in whatsoever. And I'm so grateful for that. I'm not in there whatsoever, but at least I got the sense of light, and I'm leaning on God to guide me throughout all these situations and where I'm end up being, what companies I actually do consultancy for. But this aggressive hiring and just building out employee to workforce creates this falsehood of we need these people to actually build something. There's not a need. You just want these people so that they can experiment and blow through cash as quickly as possible. So you hoping that you create this next gen product that just blows all the other social media giants out of the economy. That's not the way I feel is the smartest. It has worked, definitely. But really, Zuckerberg didn't have all these resources when he started. I think sometimes in a creative space, you got to start from your source. When you didn't have nothing, it was a source of passion there, a sense of creativity that you cannot really recreate by just getting a whole bunch of brains in the room, hiring, spending all this money. That's just not how it works. I firsthand have seen it where I was at a company and they opened this other platform that they wanted to work on. They hired like 50 people in a short amount of time span, and then 6 months later fired all of them and got rid of someone from the original companies. It's not the smartest thing to me. You got to slowly build and get there. If you go back to that source and find people with that strong sense of passion and creating things from the ground up, instead of just blowing all this money trying to just experiment with all these different things, why not just have that smaller foundation and create that source of passion and find that source of truth? You know, and that's why there's always new startups coming out every single day, because they're starting with a much smaller team. They're putting a lot of hours in. The creative juices are flowing. It's fresh, right? The closest resemblance I can make to this is kind of like trap music, right? We see all these people that were classic hip hop that were killing it, but then you got these young generations coming with these new styles of music. We got drill now, and they're just blowing everything out the water. Afrobeat, which is a very musically inclined genre, I feel, but it blew a lot of things out the water. And a lot of people that created Afrobeat, they don't have these big studios, these big budgets, and all these things to work with. It's heart and passion, and that's what I feel is the source of what you always got to go back onto when you're trying to experiment and figure out your next avenue of the next thing that's just going to blow your competition out of the water. But let's continue diving in this further. Right? He clearly says they overhired or trying a lot of different things. Says Bill George, a senior fellow at Harvard Business School. Mark Zuckerberg right now is not clear about the wants for his company. From his company, George points to the rebranding of Facebook as Meta as an example of the uncertainty around the future direction of the company. It sent signals that maybe he felt that Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp had tapered off and that he wanted to move to VR, but that obviously has not paid off yet. Meta did not immediately respond to a request for comment. VR, I do think it's a thing of the future. I'm exploring in the space as well. I bought some land, not on Facebook's platform. I don't even think you can do that right now, but I do have some decentralized land. I did a huge investment for the long term. I want to learn about it because I am in the design space. Part of what I do, I consult on creating experiences, but mostly on the 2-dimensional space, right? On your phones, on your desktop, things like that. But when it comes to VR, it's this whole Web3 thing that I'm more newer to. The last time I did 3D I was in high school doing AutoCAD, sketching out cars and such. It's a much different time now when it comes to VR. It's not like you're creating this game experience, but we have to learn about how people might be adopting that. And right now, VR, I don't think is at a high adoption rate for what would make it profitable aside from gaming. But bringing it from a gaming perspective to more of a business, since a lot of companies are still operating from a remote model, they're not having people in office. What could that look like and what would bring adoption? Of course, the earlier you start on this, the more likely that you're going to have the bigger profit margin when it does explode. And I think that's why he wanted to put his hands on it. I do respect his passion for that, definitely, completely at all. But you have to do some calculations when it comes to, is this a smart move for me to do right now versus just slowly experimenting with it and not allocating such huge amount of the budget the company has in order to that. And that's why their stock's been getting hammered. The economy has been doing bad. Every stock's been getting hammered, but their stocks has got hammered much more aggressively because if you look at their balance sheets, they're spending so much money and not providing the results and output that investors actually want. And I'm not going to crunch into the numbers, but if you actually look at the last quarterly reports from the past 4, just look at the past year, you'll see that they have not been able to perform as well as their competitors, as well as investors would actually expect. On top of that, you got the economy factor that's impacting all of this, making the slowdown even bigger. So to continue to this some more, former Meta engineer who left before this week's call tells why they were brought into the company to work on a project that months later was canned. The engineer was left to float within the company. That's a sad thing. I hate that feeling, and I did get that feeling just one time. For all my years consulting, working in the tech space, designing different applications, I've only had that feeling once, and that was when I was actually let go. But I do not like it at all whatsoever. It's not a great feeling to just people leave afloat. If you are feeling that and you're watching this video and you are in that space, I would advise you to start looking around and try to find places where your creative juices can keep flowing, because it's great to keep making money from something, but when you are not outputting nothing, for me, I feel like I'm cheating time a little bit. I feel like I got to be putting time and effort towards something, and it's not a great feeling. So that's why I would advise you look outside the scope. Don't just stay stagnant. Try to find different avenues and things you can get into, things you can invest in. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to look for another opportunity, but try to open your horizon a lot much more. And that's another thing too, for those who got laid off, really evaluate exactly what has happened in your life for the past time that you've been at this particular company, whether it was at Meta or somewhere else. Really evaluate and think about what is it that you want to do next? What is it that you want long-term for your life? In terms of success for you, what does that actually mean to you? What drives it for you? For me, I can tell you that for my whole purpose in life has definitely changed. It's not just money. It's not just gaining all this real estate and gaining this much status, but actually building the foundation for which I believe, which I'm getting from the Bible, been building a stronger relationship, which God has led me to. Right? Being in a stronger bondage with Christ. And that's where my purpose revolves around. So everything that I do revolves around bringing people knowledge, making people aware that Christ exists. And it goes around me actually doing this video with you right now, me actually working and having the resources and consulting and building out different things. All of it, I just take all of it, all the success, real estate, as I'm building more and growing all these things more and more, my stocks, index funds, my crypto portfolio, as all that stuff is just increasing and growing enormously, I'm going to use all these resources to just be all led back to that. And that's what drives me and fills me up. So that's where my creative juices actually comes from and keeps me flowing. I'm into music as well. I've been doing production for some time. I've been able to do a lot. I'm working actually on a Christian project that I'm halfway through mixing down right now. And all these things is all back to the purpose of fulfilling for me to Christ. So you got to ask yourself, what is that for you? What does that actually mean for you? Whether you feel that you're in that shoe where you're just staying afloat and you're not you're not sure exactly what's going on with the company. There's a lot of transparency that's not being disclosed to you. You feel there's a sense of falsehood. They're creating this false perception of where the company is at versus where you actually feel they are. When you feel that disconnect, you got to trust your gut and really go with it and try to find what success means for you. And it might lead you to where you actually need to go, which may mean you no longer be dealing with that company whatsoever, or another company or opportunity may open up for you, or even another venture that you were even thinking of comes open up for you. So those are the things I want you to take away if you're either in that situation, have dealt with any of these like tech layoffs or even non-tech layoffs, that I'm saying you that encouragement in regards to that. But back to this article, let's just wrap it up. I believe that Mark needs to be chairman, give up the CEO job, and bring in a professional CEO, George says. Other tech companies have successfully divided the roles of founder and CEO, he says, including Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, and Oracle. I think Mark could concentrate on his dream for Meta, but at the same time, somebody got to run the business, and many of his advertisers are pulling out, he says, and that's where the revenue comes from. I'm not going to lie to you. This year actually, very early this year, I had a bit of ad scam that happened. Someone hacked into my Facebook ads account because I really utilized them for a lot of different products I was promoting, whether it's in the music space or clothing business. I utilized the platform and somebody got into it, and it took 2 months just for me to get real access back to that account, for them to refund me back the money. That's one thing, right? And I still don't have full control over the account. I'm still in restricted mode, and we are probably 7 to 8 months down the line. That is poor customer service. If I'm the one that's actually feeding you the money, I do understand your users are priority. That's on the platform, but that is very bad customer service. But even on that note, I did buy some Facebook stocks when it dipped down under $100. Like I said, you want to ride the waves of companies when they are down. If you believe in the long-term vision of what they're working on, I believe in the whole meta VR space. It's something that I'm indulging when it comes to Web 3.0. I do think companies will eventually adopt that. People will actually adopt that. I think the goggles itself, I actually did a research with a few colleagues where we were talking about why did the Google Glasses fails and why all these things happen. And there's a lot of things that we found. One of them was the design of the way the glasses were. Like, it just wasn't a good design. It didn't look as fly. It got to look as fly for people to just rock it like normal people, me and you. You got to think about the Beats headphones, right? I think the headphones kind of sucked in their quality. They were okay at first. They have this heavy bass, but the style was just like fly, on point. You got the different color specs, and they look like regular headphones. It was something new to the market that young kids can adopt to and be stylish about. And you got to think about this with the VR headset, right? When people walk around with their VR headset, you just look like a big nerd. I'm a nerd too. I'm not going to not acknowledge that. But however, I think looking cool and feeling that cool and posture about you by what you wear makes you want to buy something. It makes you want to buy a product. So if they couldn't come out with that VR headset that just looks cool, or that AR headset. If you don't know the difference between AR and VR, VR is you're completely embedded in the environment. So you're not interacting with the real world at all. AR is augmented reality, which means that you're a part of the environment. So the glasses, you can actually see what's going on around you, and it creates this gap, this intersection, I should say, not a gap, intersection between your real world and this world. So I could be, if I'm going like this, I don't know if you've seen Minority Report when he was on the screen, all the computers moving around. That's augmented reality, when you can be on the screen just moving things around like that. And that's how all that stuff works. So that's my thoughts on Meta, where they are heading in the future. I don't think they did a smart thing by doing all this over hiring. I think it's practically stupid for any CEO to have done that. That means you really did not need these people. For you to be able to fire them means you didn't really think about if you really needed these people for the future, for everything that you were building. And that's very selfish of you, for you to even think about and doing that. Yes, I'm no CEO of no big tech company, but I do understand the perception of being in that seat where it's like you're unsure. Those uncertainties is not good. You're playing around with people's livelihoods who have kids, who has families, and now you're leaving them kind of hanging and devastated with this whole firing thing. He did leave them off with a nice package. I believe it was a 4 months, and he paid 6 months of medical insurance for them. But at the same time, it's kind of like people are uncertain and they're not sure exactly what's going on. And that's very unfair, but people do it. And if you're on the other side who has been through that or feeling that, I encourage you to always have multiple streams of investments for yourself. Try to always think about different ways for you to consume and bring in money, because these companies, they'll get rid of you like this, as you've seen what's happening with Meta, and that's all it is. And they'll send you a apologetic letter or whatever the case is, but in reality, they're catering to their investors, and that's why I buy stocks into these companies, because they give me better treatment as an investor than I would be as an employee. It's sad, but that's the reality of every single one of these companies. Their concerns are not really about the employee, but it's really their investors. Let me know your thoughts about this whole Meta tech layoff that's happening in the comments below. Like, share, subscribe. Looking forward to see you next time. Peace.